Welcome, everybody, to this podcast that we're doing with Cal Major today. Thank you, Cal, for joining us. I'm so excited to have Cal here today. Cal graduated from Edinburgh Vet School in 2012 and has a keen interest in wildlife and marine medicine, conservation, and marine ecology. And Cal says that ocean is a very special place to her and a huge part of her life. And she spent a lot of her time on and in and around the ocean, as well as advocating for its protection. And she's a really brave adventurer, and she's an endurance athlete, having completed a number of epic ocean adventure challenges, including having paddleboarded around the Scottish coastline and being the first person to have stand-up paddleboarded from Land's End to John O'Groats. She's the founder of the charity Seaful, which provides the opportunity for people, especially children, to experience and reconnect with the sea, focusing on education and inspiring people through her series of ocean-based films such as Vitamin Sea and Scotland Ocean Nation, which she's created alongside her partner, James Appleton. And immersing herself in wild natural environments brings great joy and inspires her to connect to the bigger picture. She's been fortunate enough to see some of our wildest local ocean environments, experiencing our stunning local underwater ecosystems and encountering orca, eagles, and many wonderful seabirds. She's also seen the painful and humbling contrast of the impact of human activity on these fragile sea habitats. And her aim amidst the climate and biodiversity crisis is to use her engaging storytelling to reach more people and developing their understanding of the importance of protecting wildlife and biodiversity, and to inspire long-lasting positive change. And on World Ocean Day in 2019, she was awarded the Prime Minister's Point of Light Award, and she's on the Independent's happy list of people making the UK a better place, which is super cool. And she's incredibly passionate about sharing her love of nature with other people through film writing, speaking, and her charity work. And she's an ambassador for Vet Sustain, which we're very proud of, recognising the fundamental role that vets can have in enabling and inspiring others to consider the impact of their actions on animals, humans, and the environment. She hopes that through her ocean advocacy work that she will continue to inspire others to understand the importance of our oceans and the climate and biodiversity crisis, and encourage us to make connections with the sea. So welcome, Cal. Thank you very much for giving up your time to talk to us today.
Thank you for having me. It's good to finally chat with you, sit down, have a proper chat.
Yes, and Cal's just told me that she's up in Scotland at the moment and she's having a really lovely sunny but very snowy day.
It is properly snowing, so we've had a really fun morning out in the snow already.
So, Cal, can we start with talking about your motivations? So, if we start with veterinary medicine, why did you choose veterinary medicine?
Um, I've always, it's going to sound really cliched, but I always really loved animals. I like a lot of us, I think, can identify with that. But for me, it was all about horses. So I was obsessed with horses when I was younger. When I was 10, my mum and dad for my birthday bought me like 5 horse riding lessons or something. And that was it. I was just totally obsessed with horses. I loved them. I'd spend every spare Saturday at the stables, like mucking out horses just to be around them. Um, and so that's why I went to uni. I went to vet school to be a horse vet. It was so like single focused. Um, and it just my kind of veterinary career just totally evolved in a way that I had never expected it would. So after I graduated, I spent a bit of time in mixed practice and then started some work in an equine hospital. And unfortunately, I had a really dodgy hip at that point in time, so I couldn't finish an internship there and kind of defaulted into small animal practice, which was an area of veterinary medicine that I never had any interest in before actually going through actually kind of defaulting into it, and realized that I totally loved it. Like even in mixed practice, I loved the small animal stuff. Um, and so for a couple of years I was doing large animal, and then since then it was all small animal stuff, and just yeah, found that I really enjoyed treating cats and dogs and rabbits and gerbils, and not so much rabbits and gerbils, cats and dogs.
What brought your connection about with the ocean then? So, you've obviously got this amazing affinity for the ocean. Where did that stem from? And at what point did you kind of realize that that was a real sort of focus for you?
Um, I think I was always drawn to the sea. I didn't grow up next to the sea, but we spent a lot of time when we were kids and teenagers. My parents would always take us camping by the sea. We'd always go down to Wales. I grew up between Manchester and Liverpool, and in a town called Warrington, and we'd often go down to Wales for our summer holidays and just go camping and be in the sea, you know, bodyboarding or surfing. The kind of pivotal moment for me was when I learned to scuba dive. So I was 18 years old and I took a year out before uni. I was very fortunate to be able to travel. So I went to Australia. Actually worked on a dairy farm for 6 months to earn enough money to go to Australia for 6 months. And that was my gap year before uni. Um, and learned to scuba dive on the Great Barrier Reef. And I was totally mind blown. Like I couldn't believe what was underwater. And you see it on telly, you know, you see it on these amazing documentaries, but to actually see it yourself and be immersed in that environment was totally different. And I just remember at that moment thinking this is where I want to be. This is the place I want to explore. But I knew that I wanted my life to kind of revolve around the ocean in some way. And when I was going through vet school, I remember just being so drawn back to the sea. So at weekends I'd go surfing, but also within the kind of clinical side of things, or within the veterinary side of things, I was really drawn to like, how can I use what I'm learning here to either benefit the ocean or to kind of create a life where I'm spending more time in the ocean. So, you know, some of my work experience and externships and stuff were based around marine ecology or marine mammals, and yeah, it was just always there, kind of like this real pull back to the sea. My first job was in West Wales, and I right by the beaches, beautiful beaches there, and spent a lot of time on the beaches. And then I moved down to Cornwall, to Devon, and that's where my real connection to the ocean came from, was actually getting out there and adventuring in the sea, being in the sea, surfing, paddleboarding, kite surfing, swimming, snorkeling, diving, just anything I could do outside of work to get me in the sea. And it just became this part of my life that was completely like I was totally reliant on that part of my life. I wanted to learn everything about it and explore it, and yeah, and now I live up in the Highlands of Scotland, where we have the most amazing marine wildlife and incredible ocean and lochs and islands, and it just feels like the most important part of my life.
It's lovely that you developed that passion and were able to foster it a bit through your time at vet school, and then kind of recognize how important it was for you in your career and in your life to have that grounding and that connection with the ocean all the time. I think it's really helpful for us as vets to recognize the things that are useful for us to be able to cope with the pressures of the work and the job and everything. So it's lovely that you've got that place that you can go to that gives you that kind of grounding.
Yeah, definitely. And I've kind of for many years I've had this kind of line of, you know, being outside, especially blue places, is so beneficial for our health and well-being. And we see all these studies like, you know, being outside is good for our health and well-being. Being in nature is good for our mental health. And over the last few months, I've just been really kind of playing with that idea that we need to, you know, get outside to counteract our lives. It just feels like it's the way that that's framed is so wrong. Actually, we are humans who have developed over, you know, thousands and thousands of years. And it's only in the last few hundred years that we haven't been outside, that we haven't been deeply connected to nature, deeply connected to everything around us. And so actually, I think it's the other way around. I think rather than it being a case of, oh, we should be going out in nature because it's good for our mental health and well-being, actually, the way we live our lives is really detrimental to our health and well-being. And we should be limiting our time inside behind a screen, so that we can continue to live in a way that we've developed to live as human beings. So how can we actually live our lives so that they are more more connected to nature in other ways, whether that's through growing our own food, or, you know, just creating a life that is less about being indoors and being sedentary, and being behind screens, and more about how as humans we have developed to interact with this world. It's no wonder it's good for us. No wonder it feels good. Like that is how our brains have developed, is to be out in nature.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. I think it's a really, it is important, obviously, that we try and connect with nature, because I think we've lost a bit of that, haven't we? We've lost a bit of the recognition of how important nature is for us and how it can bring so many benefits.
We have to work, we have to be inside for lots of things, but I think like really prioritizing that connection to nature is so important. And it doesn't have to be even anything groundbreaking that you're doing. The other day, I went and stood by a tree, and for about 15 minutes, maybe I actually had to do my taxes, and I was procrastinating. I did not want to be inside doing my taxes because the sun was out. So I literally went to the river and I found a tree and I just looked at it for about 20 minutes, and the lichen was amazing. There were these like massive bits of like lettucey lichen, I don't know what it's called, bits of moss, like this bit of lichen which had orange dots on it. And I was just totally mesmerized by it. And I noticed that I'd gone through like bloody to just like my whole face was lit up, and my whole being just felt calm and alive. And I think that's so special to have those moments, and to acknowledge that that is, yes, it is the antidote for our crazy lives, but it's more than that. And I think if we can see it as more than just an antidote, as like something that we can really build into the core of who we are, I think that is so important.
Yeah, I think that's hopefully that inspired you to do your taxes.
Oh,
Get
I
it.
did. I did. Yeah. Yeah. Well, also there was some surf forecast this morning, so I really wanted to get up and go for a surf this morning, so I had to do them last night so that I
Oh,
could
perfect.
go do that.
Perfect.
Too
Good
much.
motivator.
Yeah,
Very good
exactly.
motivator.
Yeah, exactly.
Brilliant. So then thinking about the ocean environment in particular, what is it about that environment that you think is so special to you?
Um, so you might be able to tell from how fast I speak that my thoughts are very fast. Like I have a lot of kind of like a lot going on in my head. Um, and for me, I feel like being in and around the sea and around water is where my brain and body have developed to thrive, if that makes sense. Like I feel so calm and connected and creative, and like I have this real kind of um just buzz about exploring the water. um I feel very empowered within my body when I'm in and around the water, and a lot of that probably comes from all the training and expeditions I've done. I know that I'm very capable around the water, so maybe there's a degree of kind of confidence that comes from for me specifically being there. Um, it feels like such an inspiring place to be. Um, and it doesn't have to be like a massive paddle or a surf. It can just be it can just be standing by the sea, looking at the seaweed, touching the seaweed, going for a swim. Going for a swim for me is a really big one. It totally settles my mind. Um, and as much as I would love to just spend my whole time foraging around in seaweed, I have to sit behind a computer a lot of the time as well. And I have to do my work, and a lot of it's self-driven. And if I, if I get myself into a situation where I'm just behind the computer, I'm just inside, I get into quite a bad way in my head.
Mm.
Um, and so again, for me, it's not necessarily that the ocean is the antidote for this way of working. It's that is how I live. Like if I don't have that time there, then I can't. It's not like just not a thing. I can't spend time behind the computer. Um, so it's a really really special place, and I have some of my best ideas when I'm out on the water as well. I come back and I'll be all fired up to do this, that, and the other, or tell this story, or um, and I love the wildlife that you can see out on the water. So where I am here in the Highlands, like I went for a paddle this morning. There were shags flying all over the loch. I went to a place where previously I've paddled with an otter. There are often sea eagles flying overhead. There are porpoise and seals right in the loch here. Like there's so much amazing stuff that you can see, which feels like a real privilege when you do see it, because it's so easy for it to hide underwater, and then you know it kind of comes into your world and you're like, whoa, this is, yeah, it's there are lots of studies around blue spaces and mental health, and I think there's a huge connection between appreciating what it feels like to be there and caring about it and acknowledging that that's a really important place. So can't get enough of it.
Yeah, I mean, it really comes across that it brings a great feeling to you. It's a deep-seated feeling that it brings, which is really
Yeah.
lovely.
I think it's as well, if there's like two words to describe it, it would be freeness and joy. Like freeness from all the constraints of our weird lives and society, and freeness from my crazy brain, and freeness from like all the expectations, and joy, which links in with, like, you know, playfulness, which I think is so rare in as an adult.
Yeah,
So
absolutely. Oh, thank you, Cal. That's lovely. So let's have a bit of a chat about some of your adventure challenges then. So you're a great adventurist and you've done lots of really exciting things. So where do your motivations come from to take on these big challenges that you've participated in?
Um, so they've always been the motivation's always been around kind of delivering a message and using an adventure as a vehicle for a story or for a message. So my first big paddleboarding adventure was around the coast of Cornwall when I was living down in Plymouth. Um, and I'd been paddleboarding for a year or so and got to all these amazing beaches, and they were all just covered in plastic. And I really wanted to talk to people about what I was seeing on those beaches, but also about how we can all have an impact on plastic pollution in our ocean, about how it wasn't just about people going down to the beach and leaving their picnic on the beach. A lot of it was plastic that was coming from inland. And so that's always been the motivation. So with Cornwall, it was plastic, and then I paddleboarded around the Isle of Skye, again to talk about plastic pollution. That was totally different because the kind of marine litter I was finding there was very different to what I was finding in the beaches in Cornwall. A lot of it was fishing gear, fishing rope. Um, and then yeah, I think like folk often ask me how, you know, how do you keep going for months and months when you're just paddling every day for, you know, 6, 12 hours a day. And it's always because there's something that feels really important um as a reason behind it. So uh, and delivering that message is either done through the stories that I'll tell afterwards in writing, or social media, or films, or interviews, or whatever it is, whatever the kind of medium is. There's always it's always to tell a story and to get people engaged and get people caring. And so my latest expedition around Scotland was to show people what's out of sight and out of mind, because there's so much happening in to Scotland's seabed. Like Scotland's seabed is incredible. It's so biodiverse. It's full of amazing creatures, and that seabed habitat is what feeds eventually the whales and the dolphins that everybody loves and knows. But people don't seem to be so bothered about clams and mollusks, which are getting destroyed on the seabed. And so I really wanted to kind of use that adventure as a way to capture imaginations and bring people into that environment, and show them what's going on, and what's there to be hopeful for, and how we can all be a part of that. Um, yeah.
It's a great motivator, isn't it? Having a story to tell when you're in those dark times of a very hard physically and mentally and emotionally hard expedition. If you've got that driver of I'm doing it for a purpose and I've got a
Yeah,
story to tell, it can keep you going in the dark times, can't it?
Definitely.
Yeah.
I'm very fortunate that my partner James, he's a filmmaker, and he paddled around Scotland with me, and there were a few moments where we'd find things where we're like, this is weird that we've come across this. There can only be one reason, and that's because we're here with cameras and with the capacity to tell these stories, and for
Yeah.
more people to see this. And it feels like a duty, and it might sound a bit lame, but a duty and a privilege to be able to get into those environments and tell those stories. Because they're so important. And if people don't know about what's happening, then they can't care. Um, and hopefully as well, a little bit, I'd like to think I'd like to inspire people to spend more time in the ocean and explore it for themselves, because it's brought me so much joy and so much learning and so much empowerment that I'd love for other people to experience that as well.
Thinking about some of these challenges, then how do you prepare for them? And in terms of your mentally preparation, your physical preparation, and any other preparation that you need to consider.
So I think organization and preparation are not always my forte. I like to kind of just crack on with things. Um, so there'll always be a degree of physical training before an expedition, which has become more uh, those preparations have become better over the years, as I've realised what they entail, what the expeditions entail, what I need to do for my body. And then I think really, if you're doing if you're doing a 2 month expedition, you can train, you can get your body ready, and you can get it used to certain repetitive movements, but you're never going to be able to train so that paddling for 8 hours a day isn't going to be really painful or really hard at some point. So I think the training is more about injury prevention than about making it really easy, if that makes sense. And then the mental preparation, I spend a lot of time looking at maps and just seeing where I can camp, for example, looking at particular tidal races if there are going to be really big areas of tides around headlands or particularly dangerous stretches of water. And there's often a lot of logistics to plan as well in terms of restocking and food provisions and kit and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of that. Um, and the mental preparation, I, I've never really, in the run up to expeditions, paid much attention to that side of things, but kind of on the, and I think that's because it's quite overwhelming to think about, like, it's a big expedition. If you, for example, let's take paddling around Scotland, 800 miles or something, it took 10 weeks. You can't plan every day because you've no idea what the wind's going to be doing on a certain day. You're totally beholden to the tides, which could be going in the right direction at 2 o'clock in the morning, or they could be going in the right direction at 10 a.m. Like, you've no idea. So the actual kind of day-to-day planning comes very kind of soon to the day. So you're constantly planning throughout an expedition and constantly looking at a weather forecast and a wind forecast and a tide forecast and kind of making those decisions as you go. So before I get on the water in the morning, that's when I do my mental preparation for that day, rather than kind of looking, before the whole expedition, looking at the whole thing as a whole. That's massive. It's too overwhelming. I'll prepare mentally for each day. So before I get on the water, I'll think, right, let's say, for example, I've got 25 miles to paddle today. I've got to get to that beach. The wind is going to be doing this. Okay, in the morning, it's going to be really flat and calm. It's going to be a glorious paddle, and that'll be the time to get my food in. And then at midday, the wind's coming in, so I know it's going to be really hard for the last 4 hours of that paddle, and I'm just going to have to put my head down and keep moving. And I know that the last 4 miles are always really hard, so I'm going to get to those 4 miles, and it's going to be really hard. I'm going to want to give up. I'm going to have to keep paddling, and I know that I've done this 100 times before, so I can do it today. Like, and just kind of mentally prepare myself for, I'm going to get to that headland and it's going to be a bit scary because there's going to be loads of chop. What am I going to feel in that moment? I might feel this. I might start to panic. Okay, it might be a bit panic inducing at that point in time. I know that I need to breathe. Like little things like that. Like, just, and you can't obviously predict anything that's going to happen on the water, but just trying to predict like how am I going to feel in that moment if it's a particularly hard day ahead of me, like particularly if it's a crossing, like I'm crossing 20 miles over to an island or something. Like I'll do a lot of visualization for that in the morning before I get on the water, because I'm like, okay, that bit's going to be really challenging, and this is how I'm going to get myself through it. I'm going to sing to myself, or I'm going to put a podcast on, or I'm going to if I've got a signal, I'll call my best mate and put my earphones on, and she will talk me through the last hour of paddling. Like little things like that really, really, really help.
It's really interesting that you say that planning isn't your forte, but I would beg to differ from what you've just said there, that perhaps, your mental preparation is something that you've learned to do, but you perhaps don't realize you're doing it all that much, because that does sound very well prepared to be really thinking about how gnarly our coastline is and how some areas of it will be really scary, will be really tricky, and to be thinking, how can I prepare myself best for that in the moment is amazing. Really, it's a really great thing to do. I'm sure that's got you through a lot of dark times when you've been out there.
Yeah, definitely has. And it doesn't counteract everything. But it definitely helps. I really love, if I compare the first expedition I did around Cornwall, I didn't know anything. Like I was totally winging it. It was a baptism of fire. I got into some pretty bad situations, didn't really know how to work out which direction the tide was going in, ended up going backwards around headlands, like couldn't really tell you what paddling against 20 knots of wind would feel like, but just cracked on anyway. And an amazing expedition for so many reasons, and such a brilliant learning curve compared to now it's feels so amazing to be able to look at a forecast, like look at a wind forecast or something, and say, okay, the wind's going to be doing that, so I know that that's going to feel like that, and that headland adding to that tide movement, adding to that wind is going to do that. Like it's like learning a new language, and it feels like such a empowering thing to do, to be able to read the sea, like to be able to look at the sea and read what the water's doing, and combine that with forecasts and with all that experience of being on the water, and have a really clear picture of what it might look like that day. It's really, I find that really exciting, and maybe that's really nerdy, but I love that part of expeditioning. Like you really get to know the environment that you're in, and I'm sure folk who spend a lot of time in the hills feel the same. Like they'll be reading forecasts, and they'll understand like what the contour lines mean and all that kind of thing. And it is like knowing a different language, and just deeply getting to know that place that means so much to you is very special.
I heard a really great quote from the Navy not that long ago, that was talking about how the top 3 centimeters of the sea is the one place that nothing chooses to live, but it is the one place that humans choose to spend their time when they're on the sea. They're in that
Oh,
top 3 centimeters.
that's amazing. I'd not heard that. Yeah, that's really funny.
Thank you for sort of sharing some insights into how you prepare, because I'm sure having that experience now and being able to prepare in the way that you do must go a long way to keeping you safe when you're on these expeditions, which is so important, isn't it?
It's really important. Yeah, and I know I kind of flippantly spoke about not knowing what I was doing around Cornwall, but actually it was pretty dodgy. And looking back now, God, the safety kit I have now compared to then is it's like two different worlds. And I think it's really important, especially if I'm going to be out on the water on my own. I need to be keeping myself safe, but also not putting rescue operations at risk of having to come and pick me up, putting anyone else at risk. So all of that kind of really carefully checking forecast is important, but also, I have VHF radio with me, a personal locator beacon, mobile phone, backup battery, flares. Sometimes, if I'm going offshore, I have flares with me, which is mad to think of carrying flares on a paddleboard. But all of these things, which for me is it's not worth not taking them, if that makes sense.
Yeah. So let's have a bit of a chat then. So you were an ambassador for Vet Sustain, and what made you take on this role? Where's your interest in Vet Sustain, I suppose?
Well, I think it's really brilliant movement because I feel like as vets and as members of the veterinary profession, we have a massive influence on the public. We're generally well respected. And also most of us care about animals, which I really hope extends to wildlife for lots of people. Um, and I think everybody has a right to understand the environment and a responsibility to stand up for it. And I think with us, as much as any professions, and in some cases more so, because we have the capacity to influence it through what we do with our careers, through how we act as a profession working with companion animals or farm animals, with the medicines we use, but also with the way that we advocate for change within society, for more sustainable veterinary practice, for even bigger picture stuff like the way that we advocate for uh, like better like One Health concepts. I think we have such an amazing influence, such a great capacity to be able to make change, and both within the veterinary industry and the wider, having a wider influence as well among society. So I feel very grateful to be part of this movement, and there's so much amazing stuff that comes up from Vet Sustain that a lot of it is around how to make a practice greener, but a lot of it is outside of that box and that bubble. There's because for this very reason that there are so many ways that we can influence the health of our planet, and the health of our animals and the health of our people, which are all obviously one thing.
Yeah, absolutely. That it's taking that integrated approach, isn't it, to how everything is interlinked and how we all influence each other.
Yeah.
So yeah, so has there been any moments, you've talked a lot about how important nature is to you, and we've obviously in hearing your bio earlier, we learned about your passion for biodiversity and climate change and sort of thinking about what we can do to influence these things. Is there any moments that have sort of changed your perspective on sustainability or sort of made you have that greater passion for these causes?
I spend a lot of time kind of seeing wildlife in the wild. And I've seen a lot of the impacts that humans have on wildlife. And I think that plays on my mind a lot, particularly when you can actually really see it with your own eyes. So I've come across entangled humpback whales, plural. I've actually now met two baby juvenile dead humpback whales that are wrapped up in fishing rope. I've seen gannets. I've had to unhook gannets from fishing lines. And I think you can't see that and not be affected. You can't see that and not think about humans' impact on the world. But really, that's the tip of the iceberg. Like that's what we're seeing. Um, and there's so much kind of within the kind of veterinary sustainability world that I think we can take a very narrow look at it and look at what's our direct impact on the environment, as a veterinary practice, for example, like what's our direct impact, our negative impact on the environment, what's our carbon footprint, what's our plastic footprint. But there's a much bigger picture than that. There's that there's how we advocate for climate justice and for climate laws. So yeah, I think and I think as a kind of veterinary professional, oftentimes I'm brought in to give opinions regarding welfare of either wild animals or for example things like farmed salmon. There's a huge issue with the welfare of farmed salmon, and we've had massive problems here where I live with enormous multi-billion-pound companies who are making massive profits from basically factory farming of salmon, but factory farming in a way that would never ever be allowed in any other species. But because it's a fish, it's kind of overlooked. So I think there's so many elements to where sustainability has a role within, or where veterinary practice has a role within sustainability. And I think it's so like it's so important that we don't pigeonhole ourselves just into how can we reduce our negative impacts, but also how can we how can we amplify our positive impact as a profession, because we have such a powerful role that we can play within that.
It's a really important message, isn't it, of how we can play such a big role in this, because we work across that human animal environmental interface, and we have an intrinsic understanding of how those three things interact with each other, and it's a really unique position to be in. So it's a great opportunity for us to drive change and to drive positive change, as you said, to not focus on the minimizing the negative, but to driving the positive is so important. Yeah,
totally. And we look at this oath we took, to do no harm. That's our patience in practice. Like that's Mrs. Jones's chihuahua that comes in that we're looking after. But that's also, for me anyway, I think we have a responsibility to wild animals, to biodiversity. And can we extend our compassion from our patients that we see in practice, but also to the wider population of animals out there, whether that's farm animals or whether that's wildlife? What can we actually do to benefit the wild animals, a lot of whom are suffering because of humans? It's really fascinating. And you look at antimicrobial resistance, or anthelmintic usage, or just generally how animal health is impacted by planetary health, and how both of those impact human health and vice versa. There's so much crossover. I find it really fascinating. So I suppose for me it's thinking outside the box. It's yes, minimize your impact, do what you can within your day-to-day role as a veterinarian, but also like what an opportunity we have to have even more impact as a profession. And that's why I think organizations like Vet Sustain are so brilliant, because you're catalyzing that and creating those connections and opening up those opportunities for people to have a wider impact.
Leading on from that, if you haven't seen Cal's films yet, I would very much encourage you to see them, because they are really fantastic, and there's some wonderful videography that goes on, and your knowledge is your plethora of knowledge about wildlife in the sea is fantastic. Thinking about those films, we can talk about some of the wonderful moments, but how do you deal with the difficult situations that you see? You talked about coming across entangled animals and the impact that plastic pollution is having on wildlife. And I think a lot of us can sometimes get bogged down in sustainability issues, in climate change issues, and we can really feel it can be a demotivator sometimes, because it feels totally overwhelming. So how do you maintain a positive outlook and being able to drive that positive change when you have seen those kind of really devastatingly sad situations that humans have created?
I think that's a really good question. I'm really glad you asked that question, because I think it's different for everybody. But for me, it's being in wild places. So, for example, the first time I came across my first ever experience of a humpback whale was my first ever juvenile entangled dead one, and it was utterly devastating. I basically saw this thing floating on the surface a mile out to sea, paddled over to it, and it was a baby humpback whale wrapped up in fishing gear. And I was pretty distraught. I mean, at the time, James and I went into filmmaker mode. He was like, Cal, like I was saying before, he's like, Cal, there's a reason that that it's me and you with the ability to tell the story that have found this white whale. So we went into filmmaker mode. We did all the pieces to camera that we needed to do. We got all the shots we needed to get, and then we paddled back into shore to finish the paddle for that day. And it was when I got back to shore, when all that adrenaline dropped, I was like, I'm safe now, I'm on land. I just cried and cried and cried. And I was so distraught by what we'd found and all the implications of it, because the rope that this animal had been wrapped up in was from creel pots, which are otherwise a really sustainable form of fishing if it wasn't for the entanglement issue. So, there's that side of things. It's like, well, Creeling is brilliant for local economies and for the people who desperately need these jobs, these coastal jobs, and it has no impact on the seabed, which is actually a really, really important part of the habitat, and it's totally overlooked. But yeah, it's got this really like dangerous side of it, and how do I navigate that? How do I tell this story without it feeling with genuine emotion, but without it feeling, how do I tell this story so that people can connect to it without it being about me? Because it's not about me, but sometimes I have to be vulnerable so that other people can connect to that story and to the human emotions behind it. There was so much going on, and it just felt like the weight of the world was on my shoulders. And also just felt so sad that this little baby whale had been wrapped up in creel pots and had probably swum with them and then drowned at some point, and his mother had probably experienced a baby drowning in front of her. Like, awful. Sorry, I've just totally brought the tone of this down. Like, I realize this is maybe
No,
a really depressing part of the
no,
podcast,
it's
but
really important. It's really important to
mm,
talk about it because it is a real problem.
yeah,
Climate glumness
yeah,
is a real problem, and not just climate glumness, but
yeah,
biodiversity glumness, and just the
yeah,
bleakness that we are facing in some ways. It's very hard to navigate, and it's really good to understand how people like yourself who are advocating, how do you manage that? Because
yeah.
you have to have coping strategies, I think.
Yeah. So my coping strategy was get up the next day and get back on the water. And I cried for probably 50% of that paddle the next day. I think I was actually exhausted as well. And I think this was the tipping point for me. And it was the bleakest, darkest part of that whole 10 weeks of paddling around Scotland. Um, and then a couple of days later, I found a gannet wrapped up in fishing rope with hooks through its tail, through its feet. And I just thought, what is the point of this? This is just I honestly, I felt so bleak, and I felt like, what am I doing, just like paddling around when when this is happening? And um, I went to the top of a cliff to look at the UK mainland's most northerly gannet colony, or maybe the UK mainland's biggest gannet colony at Troop Head. Loads of gannets, amazing place, but like loads of them with rope wrapped around their legs, or fishing hooks in their mouth, like devastating. And again, I just sat there and I just cried and cried and cried, feeling really hopeless. And then a couple of days after that, maybe a week or so after that, um, I actually paddled under Bass Rock, which is the world's biggest gannet colony, like unbelievable, thousands and thousands of gannets all swooping around overhead, like absolutely stinks, really noisy. You feel like you're in, like, I don't know, you feel like you're in a Harry Potter film and there are dementors swooping around you, and you're out on the water and there's like not only gannets but there's puffins and there's guillemots, and oh my God, there's a big blackback gull over there, and you're in the middle of the ocean but surrounded by birds, and the cacophony of noise and the smells and the life and the wildness. And that for me was the flip side of the tipping point. That was like, okay, I've been really bleak. Look at this is amazing. This is why I'm doing this. This is what I'm fighting for. This is why I'm standing on my paddleboard 6 hours on, 6 hours off, 6 hours on, 6 hours off for 10 weeks to tell these stories, because of places like this, which is a wildlife refuge, which is a sanctuary where these animals are protected, where they're studied, where they can be free, where they can reproduce, where they can thrive. And so when it gets too much for me, I know that I need to be somewhere wild. I know that I need to be somewhere where I can visualize the world I want to see, where I can be reminded that this is hope, that this is hopefulness, that this is hopefulness for a better future, that this is what I want to be seeing in the sea. This is the world I want to live in. And it can be so easy to lose hope, so easy to think that everything is ruined, that everything is gone. And I think it's important not to kind of succumb to the shifting baseline syndrome, whereby, you go somewhere and you see one whale and you think that, oh my God, this sea's full of life, was actually, 100 years ago, there were 1,000 whales there, But I still think it's important just to get somewhere wild, and wild is going to be different for different people. For some people, that's the top of a mountain. Not me. I like to be at sea level. For me, it's out in the sea on my paddleboard, or it's surfing, surrounded by Arctic terns, or it's it's just wildness. Um, and yeah, that can be big wild, or it can be looking at a tree and it's lichen because you're procrastinating over your taxes. Like I just think getting back to like why are we doing this? Why do I care? Filling your own cup with community and people and people who are part of your tribe who care about what you care about, being able to communicate with them how you genuinely feel, being able to really feel what you want to feel about that. If you feel despair, being able to feel that and communicate that to somebody, to be able to be heard by somebody else that that's what you feel, and then getting out into the wild, getting out into nature, I think is for me anyway, that's the best way I found. I'd love to actually put that question back to you, because I imagine that it's different for different people, but like, do you have a strategy for that? Because we could spend hours just looking at horrendous news articles and getting depressed, but like, how do you kind of counteract everything that you come across in your work?
Yeah, I think I think I loved your answer, and I think it's similar for me. So, but I am a mountain person. So for me it is to immerse myself in nature as well. I
Yeah.
have a great love for the outdoors. I love the British weather in all its forms.
Yep.
Um,
Me
um,
too. It's so
yeah,
good, isn't it? Like
yeah,
putting
nothing
on the
better than
rain.
like it's just about getting some good waterproof gear and getting out there. Yeah, I think it is. I think having hope is very important for me. And also trying not to focus too much on the big change, but to look at what you are able to do yourself. So I think it's easy to turn your head away, to look in the other direction, because it's painful to look sometimes at these difficult things. But I think if you can look at them and then think about what are the small positive influences that you can have, I find that comforting, because it brings me hope that if everybody were to do that, then we would create bigger change, and that to me is important. And I liked what you said about community. I think community is vital, and coming into Vet Sustain, I've really seen that, because there's a great community within Vet Sustain, and it's been very helpful for me. It's sometimes been really challenging because it brings people from different perspectives together, and sometimes it challenges my perspective, and it makes me see things in a different way, which has been very eye-opening. But most of all, it gives you people to debrief with, and to share in the despair, and to find greater hope with
Yeah.
with people that you can resonate with. So yeah, it's I think it's important we talk about it, isn't it? Because it's easy to get overwhelmed, and then to not want to immerse yourself in it anymore because it feels too overwhelming.
Yeah, definitely. I love that, what you said there about, yeah, debriefing. One of the most powerful changes I've made this year is training in the morning with a friend. So every morning we get up, we keep each other accountable, we get outside, whether run or cycle. It normally involves getting ourselves into cold water, so a run and a dip, or a cycle and a dip. But she is somebody that I can say anything to. And I'd like to think vice versa. And having that person to offload to every morning, offloading is the wrong word because that makes it sound like it's to talk to about what you feel about, and it's somebody who gets it. And I work from home on my own a lot of the time. So having somebody or a group of people to share that with, I think is so vital. Otherwise, you just, I think in general, community is so important. Moving to the Highlands, it's one of the things that I found the most surprisingly powerful, has been having a really strong community of people who get me, who accept me, who I absolutely adore, who I can spend time with in any capacity. I think it is so vital. So having people that really understand your point of view or challenge your point of view as well. You know, I have people I work with that challenge my point of view, and sometimes like, oh no, what do you want about? I'm right, but then afterwards I'll think about it. Like, actually, it's really important that I have that input, and that it's not just me on my soapbox the whole time. Um, and I'd actually like to insert a little quote here,
Yes,
which
please
is
do.
by Jane Goodall, who we all know and love. So she says that she is like the queen of hope, right? And
Yeah.
her quote is that she likes to envisage the world as a jigsaw puzzle. And if you imagine that everybody around the world, oh no, if you imagine the whole big picture, it's totally overwhelming. But if you imagine that it's a jigsaw puzzle and everybody around the world, I'm totally butchering this quote, by the way, sorry, has,
It's fine.
is working on their own little piece of the jigsaw puzzle, and you are working on your piece of the jigsaw puzzle, then that's what will bring you hope. And I love that. It doesn't have to be like difficult actions. It can be increasing awareness, or it can be, you know, improving understanding either of yourself or of the people around you. And that movement being what creates like a collective groundswell which creates change. I know that sounds really idealistic, but I honestly think that that is so so important, and has been the kind of catalyst for so many important bigger changes.
Thank you, Cal. It's a yeah, that was a lovely thing for us to talk about there. You've started this charity called Seaful, which is a lovely name. Can you tell us a little bit about it and how people might find out more about it and get involved with it?
Yeah, so this stemmed from after I paddled from Land's End to John O'Groats. I just had this real feeling that I could talk to people about, you know, plastic pollution till I was blue in the face, but if they didn't have their own connection to the ocean, then why would they care about plastic in the ocean? So it was all around the kind of the building block to being an advocate for the ocean, or being an ocean citizen, being a connection to the ocean and to an understanding of why it matters. And it has a real link to the benefits of blue spaces on well-being and mental health. It stemmed from also wanting people to understand that blue spaces are there for their mental health and their well-being, and that forming that appreciation of how it feels to be there is what will help people to care and help people to stand up for the sea. So it's kind of like where environmentalism and mental health and nature connection all intersect. And we have a few different branches of what we do. So we have a vitamin C project, which is all about actively getting people in the sea. So for a transformative ocean experiences where our beneficiaries might not have had the chance to do this otherwise, either for socioeconomic reasons or just not something on their radar. And we go paddleboarding, snorkeling, getting people in or on the sea. And our beneficiaries include, for example, young carers, refugees, socially isolated women, children from inner city schools that we take out to, you know, to the countryside or to the ocean. And we also make films, like educational films and Seaful moments, which are like little kind of 90-second clips all about the ocean, which generally don't have any narrative. They're just an opportunity for people to immerse themselves in the ocean. And I'm also starting a podcast. So maybe you could give me some tips. So and we want to empower people to be ocean citizens. So what I mean by that is they have an understanding of the ocean, so a basic ocean literacy. Ocean literacy is something we kind of weave into our sessions. They understand how it feels to be there, and we, where it's appropriate and where people want this, we empower them to you know to advocate for better ocean protection, to live in a way that is more in line with a healthy ocean. So it's just me and Lorna, the COO, who kind of work in the day-to-day running of the charity. But we have lots of wonderful volunteers, amazing volunteers who help run our sessions. And so if people want to get involved, we are always grateful for volunteers, always grateful for volunteers, either to do stuff with us kind of behind the scenes, or if, you know, if particularly you have water qualifications or an interest in the water, we're really trying to build up our local communities where we're also empowering folk who have that connection to the water, who want to share that, to do exactly that. So that's how people can get involved. So it's all about building. It's about building community. I just had this real feeling before I set the charity up that the ocean meant so much to me, and it was giving me so much, and I felt so passionately about protecting it. And I really, you know, I'm so lucky that I have that, and I know so many folk who are sea kayakers or swimmers or whatever also feel very lucky to have that and want to be able to share it with other folk who maybe haven't had that chance. So that's kind of where it stems from. And some of the feedback's amazing that we get, like really unexpected. You know, this amazing community of Ukrainian women in North Devon who we've created a paddleboarding club with, and the kind of some of the feedback to how powerful it's been for their lives is it's just unbelievable. And similarly with some of the young carers, you know, giving them this kind of just like an opening up of a new world, in terms of a new world of opportunities, like maybe career paths, or just confidence and experiences is really powerful. So yeah, it's I feel very grateful for what we're able to do, and for being able to kind of witness some of those journeys with people.
That's a lovely thing for you to have set up, because I think we often focus sustainability into the climate and biodiversity, but it is so much wider than that, and it does encompass communities and inclusivity and opportunity. For a refugee in Devon to be able to access a stand-up paddleboarding group for women is incredible, especially if they've been through great trauma. You know, given how healing the outdoor environment can be, that's a really wonderful tangible thing that you're offering for people. So yeah, I love that.
Thank you. I think community is just so important. Like, it's like kind of going back to what we were saying at the very start of how deeply, intrinsically, a human body is connected to the world around us. But it's the same for community. Like, we're social beings. We were never meant to be on our own. And the kind of coming back to community and connection, I think, is everything. I think it is the root of how we improve the environment, is like caring about it. I just think it's everything. And if you look at kind of what's driving the planetary crises, a lot of it, if you actually dig down into it, is greed and consumerism, and a total lack of understanding of what's actually important.
Oh, Cal, so so what's next for you then? What's the next kind of 6 months to a year going to look like for you?
So I going to Uganda in February with James. We are going to one of James's pals runs an organization which is all about slow travel. So it's travel that benefits local communities, and we're basically trekking through the highlands in Uganda to where the gorillas live, in a way that is actually benefiting like Indigenous people who were kicked off their land, using them as local guides, staying with local people in local communities, learning about the forests from people who've lived there. So it's all about kind of biodiversity and yeah, communities. So really excited about that, and traveling slowly. So trekking there rather than, you know, driving in or getting a helicopter in or whatever.
Yeah.
And yeah, totally appreciate that I am also flying to Uganda. So that's always a bit of a strange decision to make, or a difficult decision to make, to fly places. But really looking forward to what I can learn from being in that country, and I'm really interested in Indigenous wisdom, and in how that like what that looks like in the UK as well. Like what is Indigenous wisdom in the UK? What does what who are the people within the communities that understand the environment and know about it and have the stories to tell and the connections that they've made. So really looking forward to that. I do a couple of days a week at the local practice in my community here in Ullapool. And yeah, just small animal stuff, which I really, really enjoy. I love being a part of the community in that way. And I often get amazing wildlife brought in. Last week I had 4 storm petrels brought in, which was just wonderful being able to rehabilitate and re-release them. Just working on various different projects over the winter so that come the summer, our crazy schedule can resume. So got some really, really fun plans for next summer, working with seabirds out on some amazing islands in Scotland. And hopefully by then I will have, we were gifted a sailing boat a few years ago, and I've been doing some bits and bobs of repairs and rejuvenation on her. So hopefully we'll get her back on the water in May, now that I've got all my sailing qualifications and everything. Hopefully get her on the water in April or May next year, and be able to use that to tell more stories and explore the ocean where we live. And then also today, once I get off the call with you, I have a funding application to write so that we can get some more paddleboards and equipment up here in the Highlands to do some more of our vitamin C project stuff here. So what I do is so varied, and I really, really value that. And I love that I have the freedom to be able to kind of pick up on things that feel meaningful.
Oh, that's wonderful, Karen. So I'm just going to finish then with a quick fire round. Okay. So the first thing is, what does sustainability mean to you, sort of in a nutshell?
I think sustainability is about, for me, at this point in time, at this point in human history, I think it has to be about readdressing our relationship with the planet and with nature and with wildlife, rather than like looking at like what boxes can we tick to make our actions more green or to have less of a negative impact. I think it's like there's something really wrong systemically with how we live and what we value as humans. And so I think it's about coming back to what's really important and how we can live our lives in a way that is genuinely harmonious with the natural world.
Oh, I love that. That's a lovely answer. Okay, second quick fire question. What are the top 3 essential items to take with you on an ocean endurance adventure challenge?
Food, food, and more food. So yeah, definitely food. And I have these insulated canisters which are amazing, which I always take hot food in on the water with me, and also flask of tea. So if anyone's interested in them, they're amazing. They're from Clean Canteen and they are total game changers. And I take them everywhere with me on adventures because then I can have hot food and hot drink wherever I am. My third item is a set of headphones or like little earphones, which I try to use as little as possible because I want to be as mindful as possible. But I mean, sometimes I'm on the water for 12 hours a day, and sometimes I just need a bit of Taylor Swift or, some like heavy metal or something to keep me going, or a call to my best mate for a
Yeah.
pick me up. So headphones are absolutely essential.
Brilliant. Yeah. 3 very, very sensible items, I'll say there. Okay. And if you could wave a magic wand to improve the sustainability of the veterinary profession, what do you think you would do?
So I found this one really tricky to prepare an answer for because I think it's twofold for me. I think the first is readdressing our relationship, especially as the veterinary profession, because of all the mental health concerns with the profession. Like, if any profession needs more time in nature, it is us. Um, So I would really love it if that was seen less of a kind of adjunct to keep, less of a kind of, oh, this is something that you can do to, uh, as a kind of like add-on to life, and more integrated into how we see life as vets. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know if that's, yeah, I don't know what that looks like, but I think like a genuine deeper connection to nature, and that obviously then has all the benefits of people caring more about the environment and making choices that can benefit the planet and can create better sustainability. And then I think as well, uh, as a kind of profession, things like anthelmintic and antibiotic and general drug usage, like there's a massive footprint from all of those, both in terms of the production of medicines and the shipping and the packaging and all the rest of it. But things like anthelmintics, I find the overuse of anthelmintics quite scary, and really hard to tackle in general practice because of the way that we see their usage, because of the issues around not treating animals. So yeah, I think I think those are my two.
Thank you. Yeah, really, both really, really sensible places to start, isn't it? It's trying to almost get ourselves in order before we try and influence, and
Yeah,
do too much more. So yeah.
yeah.
Oh, thank you, Cal. I've absolutely loved chatting to you today. It's been a total joy and so lovely to hear about all of the wonderful things that you're doing and all the adventures that you've been on, and how inspiring you are for people that are, also lovers of the ocean, and people who also haven't yet found the ocean. Hopefully they'll be inspired to go and spend a bit of time by the sea. And tell us a little bit about how people can find out more about you. Where's your sort of what's the best ways to find out more about what you're up to in the future?
Thank you. So the social media is I tend to just post on Instagram and Facebook. I actually refuse to use Twitter stroke X for many reasons. So Instagram and Facebook, I mean, they're not much better in terms of the change you want to see in the world, but it's a good way to get messages across. So Instagram and Facebook, if you just search Cal Major, or Cal Major Ocean Advocate. And then I have a little website as well. Just search Cal Major. You should find my website. And shameless plug for our TV series, which is on STV Player, which is available in the whole of the UK. STV's Scottish TV. It's available in the whole UK. If you just search for STV Player, you can create a free account. And then our film series is called Scotland Ocean Nation, and it's a 3-part documentary about paddleboarding around Scotland and all the wildlife that we encountered, and the people who were connected to the ocean, their stories, some of the issues facing the seas that are out of sight and out of mind. And then also lots of films on YouTube, which again, if you find my website, you can find my YouTube, or find any of my socials, you can find my YouTube. But yeah, thank you so much. It's really, really lovely to speak to you as well, and to kind of, it's not often that I have the capacity to talk about my ocean advocacy work in a kind of veterinary sphere. So it's really nice combining the two of them, and really kind of digging into how the two are combined, because sometimes I see, I do my work with seabirds, or uh, I'm an ambassador for Vet Sustain, and so there are lots of crossovers. But sometimes I also see my work as two different things. I think definitely my work in clinical practice is quite different to my work with the Seafood charity. But it's really lovely to kind of, reconnect to how all of those intertwine. And so thank you ever so much for giving me the time to stand on my soapbox today.
Oh, well,
um,
it's been an absolute joy, and I hope that we can do it again at some point,
that'd be
maybe next
great.
year, to check in again and see
Oh
see
yeah.
where you're up to, because I think the more we can talk about relatable stories and meet people who are doing their bit, it inspires us to also do our bit. And that, I think that's really important. And it's lovely that you've got both the veterinary angle and your wildlife angle and your just love of nature and the ocean, and how you bring all those three things together to create your life and your happy place. And that's a really lovely thing to share with people. So it's been a real joy. Thank you very much.
Thank you. That's really kind of you. Really appreciate that.